What's up, everyone? Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming back to the show after a small, unplanned hiatus due to Father's Day weekend, followed by the sun trying to destroy the Pacific Northwest. As you might have seen in the news, there was a heat wave of epic, record breaking proportions in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I'm at. So, this wasn't just any heat wave, but this would have been hot for any region, including deserts. I mean, it reached like 116 degrees in some places in the States, and I think as high as 121 degrees north of me in Canada. This area is in no way prepared for this kind of heat. In the dead of summer, we might get maybe the low 90s for like a day or two, and there's very few houses here that have air conditioning, so it was just bad. It was as bad as it could get. It was so bad that the government set up cooling centers for people to hide in. There were stores running sprinklers on their roofs. Power outages were happening due to the strain on the power grid. Just from the stores and people that had small window units running their AC, the power grid just couldn't take it. And there are parts of major highways that actually buckled under the heat. And there were reports of people, the sidings, like vinyl siding on people's houses, just melting, and plastic in their houses melting. As a matter of fact, I have this metal poster up here that's it's adhesively stuck to the with magnets to the wall. So there's a magnet that's adhesively stuck to the wall, and then the metal poster sticks to the magnet. It melted during this heat wave. I think it got to about 110 on this week on Monday, and the poster actually fell and damaged some of the sheetrock behind me because it's a heavy metal poster. But personally, I was lucky enough to know a few people with air conditioning that I could escape to on that peak heat day. We tried to make it the prior day at our own house when it was like 104 degrees, and it was rough. Our house doesn't have any air conditioning except for like a small window unit, and our cat was especially miserable that day. So we were like, we can't do this another day, and we hid at another house with air conditioning when the temperature got up to about 110. And I'm so thankful we were able to hide somewhere. Um, so it was just absolutely insane. I can't even describe how hot it was here and how unprepared this area is for that kind of heat. But that's why I wasn't able to record last week, is because it was extremely hot in the recording room, just for myself, and I was actually worried about the equipment overheating. Like I said, there's no air conditioning here, and at one point I tried to set up the recording area, and I actually have this new teleprompter in front of me, so I can actually look directly into the camera now, which is really nice. But I was actually worried about the heat damaging the equipment, melting the teleprompter, or the any plastic in the teleprompter, because I went into work in the room for maybe 5 minutes and I was a mess. Like, it was so hot. It must have been at least 120 something degrees in that room. So, after having survived this solar apocalypse in the area, that is not even used to this kind of heat, today I'm going to be talking about a finance book I read during the heat wave, and how it relates to our quest for financial independence and using that for your human betterment and my human betterment. So the book is Rich Dad Poor Dad by Kiyosaki. This is a pretty old book. I think it was first published in 1996, but this is the 20th anniversary edition. It also has additional study guides, updates, and breakdowns, because it's the 20th anniversary edition. It's like $7 at Walmart. You can probably even get it cheaper on Amazon or through like the Kindle or Kindle. Is it Kindle ebook reader. You could probably finish the entire book in one evening or two. It's a pretty easy read. I would suggest getting this 20th anniversary version because you could finish this book in like an hour or two if you just want to read the chapter breakdowns, instead of actually reading the entire book. If you're just like strapped for time, that's what I would recommend, because in the actual book, Robert kind of spins this narrative story about his childhood lessons, and that he learned from his father, which he refers to as his poor dad, and then his friend's dad, who he refers to as his rich dad, and the lessons he learned from both of them and how they're like the opposite of each other financially. And then he uses those lessons in the story to teach a larger point. If you want to just get to the point without the narrative, because the narrative does get a little slow, and you're like you're kind of like, just let's get to the point here, Robert. If you don't want the narrative part, just read the chapter breakdowns. The chapter breakdowns are 3 to 5 pages each, and I think there's like 9 chapters, maybe 10 if you count the synopsis, the finale part. Um, if you want to do that, just read the 20th anniversary edition, read the chapter breakdowns, hour or two, you're done. But I'm gonna go through and kind of break down the chapters, or he has them broken down as lessons. So I just want to talk about the lessons that he learned from his friend's dad, who he refers to as his rich dad. So lesson one is that the rich don't work for money. Robert's main lesson here is that most people financially operate from a position of fear, um, and that makes them work for money because they're afraid of losing their job or losing their house, or just the fear of not being able to pay a bill. And this is totally understandable. I mean, I feel like that a lot. I don't quite agree with him that this fear is bad or that you should ignore it, but it's good to acknowledge that it's there, and acknowledge that a lot of times you're operating financially from a place of emotion as opposed to the math or the long term benefit that you're going to receive from certain decisions. So he has a couple quotes from his rich dad, and I took these from the breakdown at the end. The narrative kind of is more eloquent with these, but these are the quick quotes from his rich dad, or his friend's dad. So he contends, the rich dad, that the poor and the middle class work for their money, but the rich make their money work for them. I understand what he's saying here. I think that it's a little vague. It's a little talking down to people. If I have to be honest, uh, everybody works for their money, but I think what his main point here is that the rich have made smart financial decisions in creating assets that the money they spent on those assets then works for them. And he gets to that later on in the book, but when it first comes up in the book, it's a little off putting because you're like, well, of course I have to work hard. Don't I have to work hard to make money? The Another quote is, life pushes us all around. Some people give up and others fight. A few learn the lesson and move on. They welcome life pushing them around. Again, he's right. Life does push you around. It's not going to coddle you. It's not going to always go your way. Matter of fact, most of the time, it's not going to. I know from personal experience that the last couple of years were really rough. I mean, I had a lot of our cat got sick. There was veterinary bills. There was house issues. There was medical issues. And all of this was happening like just one thing after another. Cars break down. It's just like, you're just getting beaten up and beaten up. And his basic idea here, I think, is that a lot of people will just kind of curl up into a ball and take it. But that the rich will be pushing back the wealthy. And I think that it's more, I think he's phrasing this badly, but I think it's a little bit like, you'll hear like Jocko Willink talk about this sometimes. He's a Navy SEAL, and on his podcast, and he thinks that this adversity that people experience is good. Adversity is good because it helps build you up. It helps make you stronger, and it helps make you adapt to your situation. And financially, my assumption is here that Robert is saying the same thing, that being beat up financially will make you adapt. So you might be in a situation where you're like, and you hit that point where you're like, I never want to be in this situation again. I don't want to feel like this again. And you will try and find a way to accrue assets, or form a business, or find some way so that you will never again be in that situation. um another quote is, stop blaming me and thinking I'm the problem. If you think I'm the problem, you have to change me. If you realize you're the problem, you can change yourself, learn something new, and grow wiser. Again, I think this is a little off-putting, but I understand what he's saying. If you are like, my job is the problem because it's not paying me enough, and I'm, you, how are you going to fix that? That's an outside circumstance that you can't change potentially. I mean, you might be able to, you know, squeak out a little raise or something like that, but long term, you're trying to fix an external thing, and that might not be possible. But one thing you can do is fix yourself, because you have control over yourself. So maybe when you are, and I've had this situation before where you're like, I haven't had any raise or anything like that in a long time, and I'm tired of it, and you're constantly trying to push on your boss, or push on an employer to give you a raise, and it's just not happening. And eventually you have to say they're not going to budge. So it's time for me to change, and whether that's a career change, or a job change, or learning a new skill or something like that, or growing your financial security more, so that you can be like, I don't need this job anymore. You have more control over that than you have over changing that person's mind or changing that employer's mind. So I think that's what he's really getting at here. But it's a little off-putting, because you're not blaming yourself, and you're not. I think blaming yourself and calling yourself the problem is a little negative. It should just be that you can't change other people, so you should focus that energy on changing yourself. So I a little more finesse on this particular quote would be nice. Um, uh, he also says, when it comes to money, most people want to play it safe and feel secure. So passion does not direct them, fear does. Again, I see what he's saying. It's scary to take a chance financially, especially when you have others to provide for. So I feel like this is um, a little laissez-faire. It's a little, pie in the sky, because the person saying this is already wealthy. So for them, it's easy to be like, oh, we'll just roll the dice. Let's see what happens. I think you have to have, maybe it's good to have a little bit of that fearlessness when you're starting out, but I would disagree with this a little bit and say you should be careful, because you don't want to just lose everything and then be in an even more dire situation. And I think that's part of the problem with financial advice like this is, um, a lot of times it's not talking about people that are in a particularly difficult situation, or can't seem to crawl their way out of it, because they just keep getting hit over and over and over again. Um, so this quote, I mean, I like I said, I get what he's saying, but I feel like it might be coming off a little harsh. Um, Most people given more money only get into more trouble, he says. I've heard this before. It says that, I've heard this before, that as your income rises, your expenditures rise. And then people are like, I feel just as broke as I did before I got this raise. That might be the case. And I think that might be something that mentally you just need to be aware of. I've heard of people using tactics where they'll basically, if they get a raise, they will ignore it completely. Because they're like, well, I was already paying my bills fine before, so this extra money is just extra. And then they'll start to use that to invest in assets and savings and stuff like that. So maybe it's just a mental trick where you need to remember that just because you have more money doesn't mean you should be spending more. Um, you should make sure that you're financially independent first, financially secure, and okay with spending that money, without taking from another spot that is probably more important. Um, so Another thing that he says is that it's fear that keeps most people working at their jobs. The fear of not paying their bills, the fear of being fired, the fear of not having enough money, and the fear of starting over. And that's the price of studying a profession or trade and then working for money. Most people get stuck in a rat race of money, then get mad at their boss. End quote. um, so I totally understand what he's saying. There is a level of fear of at work. Most places, at least in America and most states in America, are at will hire states, or at will employment. So basically, you could be let go at any time for any reason. That carries with it a certain level of fear, because you're constantly like, well, if I was to lose this job, what would happen? So I wouldn't be able to pay my bills, and then like, everything will fall apart. I'll lose the house, and da 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 da. And I mean, it's just a cascading failure at that point, of finances. Um, so a lot of people are scared of that situation, but I think that um, that's his point, is that you shouldn't be operating from fear, and you should become financially diverse enough that your main job is not the job that is making you your money and helping you pay those bills and stuff. Instead, it's your assets that are doing that. Um, so because people have that fear, they're afraid to start a new business, or change jobs, and or start a whole new career path and go back to school. It's terrifying. But maybe it is the right financial decision for you. Maybe it's, in the long term, it's going to give you that financial independence that you want. But it's just something that he throws out there as a, be aware that fear is usually the motivator for most people working. Um, and I've heard this before, even with, I was recently watching something where they said they talked to a bunch of doctors, and they asked these doctors, like, if you had $10 million, would you still be a doctor? And they were like, no, I would leave immediately. And some of them were even like, I would leave in the middle of surgery. So what was keeping them there wasn't a passion for that job. I mean, they might enjoy it, but what's really keeping them there was money, was the fear of losing money and losing their stability, and that accrual of assets and wealth. But as soon as they had that wealth, they were like, I'm out of here, man. So it was a pretty large amount. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but it was a surprisingly large amount. Um, and another thing he says is that most people don't know it's that their emotions that are doing the thinking for them financially, which is totally true. Like he said before, fear is a big motivator, and that's an emotion that is driving most of your financial decisions. Or maybe it's, you're sad, so you go shopping and buy yourself something, but that's not really helping to build your financial security. And I think we're all guilty of that. Shopping therapy is totally a real thing, and for most people, even if you don't realize it, you probably are doing it every now and then. There's like, this little bauble makes me feel better, for this brief moment of time, but in the long run, it's probably doing some damage to your financial stability or your financial future. And you can buy those things later when you have that financial stability all, like, stacked and ready to go. And another thing he says, and I found this one really interesting, was a job is a short-term solution to a long-term problem. So I kind of get this. The long-term problem is financial stability. Like, you want to be financially stable enough to not need a job, and the job is just the short-term solution to get you money to pay your bills, to hopefully build a financial, like, nest egg or stability or financial independence. But that the job is probably not going to meet that requirement. You're going to have to eventually build more assets, and invest and do all these other things to build this financial independence, and solve this long-term problem. But the job is just the short-term solution to that, and you're going to live much longer probably, hopefully, than your job. People usually retire, and you still have, what, 2 3 decades after that, after you retire, more if you're lucky. But the job is not the solution anymore. It was what you invested before that. So I understand what he's saying here. Lesson 2 is why teach financial literacy. So in this chapter, Robert makes the case for financial literacy because you can't succeed financially if you just don't understand how it works. In particularly, I should say in particular, that sounded funny. In particular, he stresses the acquiring of income producing assets that will pay you as opposed to using your income to pay expenses only. So he has this chart that he uses, and there's an income and an expense column, and then there's an asset column. He basically says that your income column should feed your asset column. So you're building assets, and then the income generated from those assets will eventually be able to pay off these expenses that you have. So you have the assets building up wealth and then paying off your expenses, and then the income is just the driver to buy additional assets, basically. And this is probably something that's going to take a while to get to. I really don't see being able to do this right off the bat, because it seems like most people don't have enough money to just buy a bunch of assets with a ton of their income. Most of that income is going to rent and food and transportation costs and childcare and all kinds of other expenses. But if you could slowly accrue those assets, $100 here, a little bit here, and just as long as those assets are producing value and income, then that income can help pay your expenses in the future. So this is a long-term solution, but I understand what he's saying here with buying the income producing assets, as opposed to just using your income to pay, because otherwise you'll always be at a zero balance. You'll always be using your income to pay your expenses and then not having any growth. Like, you might have like an extra $100 or $200 to throw into savings, but that's, inflation's going to kill that. So you need something more than that to help build up your asset column, so that eventually that asset column can take over paying your expenses, as opposed to the income column. So some quotes from his rich dad in this chapter, that I kind of plucked out were, it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. So it doesn't really matter. Let's say, okay, I have a story here actually about this. So a coworker and I were talking recently about raises, and he said that he was talking to his neighbor and complaining that he was broke and that he was making, I'm going to make up a number, but he was saying, oh, I make like, $50,000 a year, and I really wish it was more. And his neighbor was like, well, I make like $250,000 a year, and I'm broke too, right? And he was like, and the quote, remember the quote he said was like, it was something like, his neighbor goes, we're all broke, we're just different levels of broke. And I think that is the opposite idea of what and I think that's the opposite idea of what Robert is saying here. Is this person was basically like, we're always going to be broke no matter how much we make, but he was making so much more money and it didn't really matter. So it's really about how much money he was keeping. Had he lowered his lifestyle, and if I remember right in the story, his house was very expensive, and he had very expensive cars. So it was like, well, no wonder you're broke. If he had instead invested in that assets idea, he'd have so much more money kept, as opposed to what is it he's making. So my fictional coworker, my coworker here that I'm kind of fictionalizing, let's say he only made like, he's making the $50,000 as opposed to this other guy's $250,000, but he's saving $10,000 a year. in various assets, but the $250,000 guy is not saving anything, then in the long run, the $50,000 guy is going to be worth more. Like, so it doesn't really matter how much you make, it's how much you keep. The trick is to figure out how to keep as much as possible. So, um, intelligence solves problems and produces money. Money without financial intelligence is money soon gone. So I think this is kind of like that old quote of a fool and his money are soon or quickly departed or quickly separated, something like that. I can't remember the quote exactly. But basically, you should try to learn as many skills as possible because and become financially literate so that you don't get taken. Basically, there's a lot of scams out there, and if you're not financially intelligent enough or financially literate enough to know what to look for, then you're going to get taken. Your money gone like that. There's a lot of people out there willing to take it. Another quote is that rich people buy assets, but others acquire liabilities and think they're assets. So what he's talking about here is that usually the rich person's mindset is to buy income producing assets. So stocks, bonds, maybe Bitcoin. There's a little debatable there, especially based on its market lately. But things like that, real estate, as opposed to what a lot of people think an asset is. It's like, I bought this, a BMW, or I bought, this nice setting for my living room or whatever. Those aren't assets. Those are just luxury items that you bought that usually depreciate in value as soon as you bring them home, and they're actually liabilities because they only cost you money. They don't generate any money, and they're not even going to keep their value actually. So I think that's kind of what he's saying here, is that there needs to be a change in thinking here on what to buy as is this something that's going to appreciate in value. And a really interesting thing is, he even in the book, he even says that your own personal house is a liability. And at first I thought that was really weird, but then I was thinking about it more, and as he explained it more, if you're living in it and you're paying the mortgage on it, it's not really producing any money for you. It's just costing you money because it's your residence. So I see using his distinction there, I see why he says that's a liability as opposed to rental property. If you had rental property, that would be an asset because your tenant would be paying your the rent, which would help you pay the mortgage, and then the equity would be the income producing, asset. It would just increase in value. So that's where he makes the distinction there. And he doesn't really count the equity you build in your own house because it's, you're still paying money into this mortgage. And you could lose it, if you can't pay it, if you can't pay it, then where are you gonna stay? Where's your residence gonna be? So it's a liability, not an asset. So he also says if your pattern is to spend everything you make, most likely an increase in cash is just going to result in an increase in spending. And this is kind of what he mentioned earlier, and what I brought up. Usually when people get raises, their spending just goes to the new level of raising, and maybe a good thing to do is to just say, okay, well, I'm not even gonna acknowledge this raise. That's just going to go, whatever I was making before was fine. If assuming that it met your needs, you would just say that's my level of living, and of lifestyle, and everything else is going to go into assets and savings and stuff like that. So another thing he says is, by not fully understanding the money, and the vast majority of people allow its awesome power to control them. And I think that's true. There's a lot of people, myself included, that could probably benefit from learning more about how money works. I mean, right now you have the Fed, because of the pandemic and stuff, printing out lots of money, and it's like, how how's that going to affect the economy? How's that going to affect your take home pay? You know, and I think it would be wise to become more financially literate so that you can understand the discussion and prepare yourself for those changes. So, um, lesson three is mind your own business. So here, Robert talks about how many people spend their lives minding somebody else's business and making that other person rich. The example he gives is like the banker. The banker doesn't own the bank. It's not his business. It's his profession. So there's a difference between profession and business. Uh, Minding your business does not mean starting your own business, though it might, if you feel compelled to do that and you feel like you can really serve that space. Instead, your business is actually, what he means by that is it revolves around your asset column and its growth and success. So like it's like let's say your asset column is like um, real estate and Bitcoin and stock or something like that. That's your business, and you should be educated in those fields, basically, in those disciplines. So Robert says the best way to start minding your own business is to, first of all, keep your daytime job. He then recommends buying real assets, not liabilities or personal effects that don't really have any value once you get them home. Kind of like we were talking about before. Keep your expenses as low as possible. Reduce liabilities and diligently build a case like of solid assets of things that really are accruing income or value. He says the assets fall into the following categories. I'm sure there's more than this, but these are the ones that he points out. The assets are businesses that do not require his presence. So if he can set up a business that actually doesn't require his presence, but it makes money, then that's an asset. A good example of this might be, I don't have the audience for this now, but hopefully someday, if I get more subscribers, I see a lot of people on YouTube and podcasts, in the podcast sphere, they'll have merchandise and Amazon merchandise. And what's the other one? Is it Teespring or something like that? There's a bunch of these like on-demand print businesses. So you could, if you set up a merch store and people buy your merchandise, that's a business that you're running that doesn't require your presence. It's all just set up for you, and it just cuts you checks. It just makes income. They take their cut, but you get your cut, but you don't have any inventory. You have no supply to deal with, no shipping to deal with. It's all them, and you just get a cut of it because you made the designs. Number two is stocks. Number three, bonds. Number four is income generating real estate. And like I said, your house does not count. He considers that a liability. So we're talking buying real estate to either flip it or rent it out or something like that. Number five is notes. Number six is royalties. Maybe, writing, off a jingle or pictures or, stuff like that. That seems pretty rare. I don't know anybody who makes money off of royalties. I might know one person. I'll have to ask him, but, you would have to actually produce something of artistic value to get royalties. And seven is anything else that has value, produces income, or appreciates in value, and has a ready market. So even if something is valuable and let's say it does appreciate in value, if there's no market for it, it's not worth anything really, right? I mean, if you can't sell it, if you can't get rid of that, who cares if it's worth, $500,000 if there's no market for it? That's like a lot of those things on like the Antique Roadshow. You'll see these things that will be like you'll see like a rug that looks nice, but it just looks kind of like a rug that you would see anywhere else. But then the appraisers are like, well, this is like a rare 15th century rug. It's worth $1 million, but there's no market for it. I mean, sometimes they'll put those things up on to the auction block, but it's not necessarily going to sell if there's no market for it. So it might theoretically be worth that much, but if there's no ready market for that product, it's not really worth that much. I mean, if you can't sell, it's not worth anything, right? At least in the perspective of assets, it's of historical value, but not asset value for building your wealth. Some quotes from Rich Dad on this one are: to become financially secure, a person needs to mind their own business. And like we said before, minding your own business is mining your asset column and the things that you know and learn in that column. Really, your business is building up your asset column. The rich focus on their asset column while everyone else focuses on their income statements. So this is kind of goes back to what we were saying before. It's like the two people, one that makes 50,000 and one that makes 250,000. The real rich people are buying assets, not worrying about the how much money their income is. I mean, an income is good, and I mean, the more the better, right? But what's really going to make you wealthy and give you financial security is that in cooperation with building the assets, because your income can be spent really easily, but the assets are, if you do it correctly, are meant to appreciate in value. And it doesn't matter, like, if your income is changing from time to time, or you're changing jobs, because the asset column should be working for you, because that's your business, as we said before. So financial struggle is often directly the result of people working all their lives for someone else. You hear this all the time, where people are, they'll work a 9 to 5 for 30, 35 years. And when they're done, they're like, I'm still struggling. I don't have any money. They start taking retirement and Social Security, but it's not enough to pay the bills. But they spent their entire life working for someone else. So I think the idea here is that if you don't want to be in that situation and you really, really want to succeed, you have to run your business and like focus on those assets and those hustles that will generate income. So, one of the main reasons that net worth is not accurate is simply because the moment you begin selling your assets, you are taxed for any gains. So even saying your net worth is like $2 million or something like that, yeah, it sounds nice, but as soon as you try to liquidate those assets, the government comes in and asks for their share of the gains. It's like capital. I think it's called capital tax gains, or capital gains tax. So net worth is not a very good indicator of your wealth. What's probably a really good indicator, and I think this is what Robert's getting at here, is how much income is being generated from your assets without selling them. Just what's being generated. That's your metric for wealth. And this is kind of reinforced by the next quote where he says, once a dollar goes into it, that's the asset column, never let it out. It never comes out. You just think of it as your employee. And the best thing about a dollar is it can work 24 hours a day and work for generations. So once it's in, it never comes out. The assets are the workers in this situation, and they're just producing income for you. It's as simple as that, as far as he's concerned. An important distinction that he makes between rich people and everyone else is that the rich, and I don't know if I agree with this in particular, but he says the rich people buy luxuries last, while others buy luxuries first. I don't think that most people that are poor or struggling are actually buying luxuries per se. They're buying survival things, things that are required in a modern world, a modern economy to survive, to find work, to do that. So this one is a little jarring. I see what he's saying. He's saying delayed gratification is going to help you get ahead. But maybe he should say it like that. The way it's said this way is a little off-putting in my in my opinion. Paying for medical expenses is not a luxury, but that's usually what people buy first, or is in some situations, you know, uh, and that reduces the amount of opportunity they have to buy assets. So there's a lot in here. I don't really agree 100% with that particular quote, but I understand what he's trying to get to. And I think if you actually read his description of this quote and the sort of narrative behind it, if you want to read the full book, then you'll understand that too. Um, so lesson 4 is the history of taxes and power of corporations. Sounds boring, right? Well, anyways, in this chapter, it's not that boring. In this chapter, Robert just talks about taxes and how to navigate them. But essentially, he says that once you have enough assets, you should operate them like a corporation. And you might be asking yourself, well, what's the difference between acting as a corporation and acting as an individual? Well, this gets interesting. As a corporation, you earn money, you spend the money, and then you're taxed on the remainder. So if you spent everything that you made, you'd be taxed for nothing. It would be considered zero income, right? Whereas as an individual, you earn money, you're taxed on the money you earned, and then the remainder you get to spend. So it seems a little messed up, right? Like it's like, that's why, uh, that's why you often hear business, like you hear people saying businesses pay little or no taxes. That's why. It's because they pay on their leftover earnings, which is usually significantly smaller than their actual earnings because they just spend it all or spend as much as they can. Business write-offs. You always hear about those. So as you become more financially secure in the assets, it's to your benefit to learn how to operate like a business, basically, to protect those assets. Um, and basically, you're just going to be using the same advantages that the rich use, the businesses use. And I mean, the tax loopholes are there. You should use them to your advantage, right? You can play the same game they do, basically. Um, so, some quotes from the rich dad in this chapter are my rich dad just played the game smart and he did it through corporations, the biggest secret of the rich. I think we can all agree that that's probably one of the biggest secrets of the rich. And you hear about it all the time, especially these days, about how, Amazon doesn't pay its fair share of taxes and stuff. Well, it's because of the way that the tax code is written. They only pay on the remainder after spending. So whether that's right or wrong, that's the way the tax code is. So, maybe you should take advantage of it the same way they do. Um, and he acknowledges that in the next quote, where it says the reality is that the rich are not taxed. It's the middle class and everyone else. I mean, that's plain as day that the rich are not taxed because their assets are different, and they incorporate, and they know the tax code and they know how to get around it. So it's not inaccurate to say that the rich are not taxed. Employees earn and get taxed, and they try to live on what is left. A corporation earns, spends everything it has, and then is taxed on anything left. It's one of the biggest legal loopholes that the rich use. That's from the rich dad too. And there's probably exceptions to this rule, of course, but this is usually the story you hear in the news, and it probably doesn't apply to small businesses as much. But those legal loopholes are there. So as your assets grow and start to produce income, he's like, hey, you should just use the same loopholes that they do. It's, it'll save you money. It'll be it saves them money. It saves them in taxes. Lesson 5: the rich invent money. This one's a little confusing the way he phrases it, but basically, he talks about how the rich are using a small amount of money to create large amounts of money by using like well-timed investments. It gets a little tricky, but it you'll have to read the chapter or at least the synopsis to break down to really understand this one well. But I just wanted to get to the quotes. But basically, he's saying that everybody has this like tremendous potential and are blessed with gifts. But the one thing that holds them back is a degree of self doubt, not a lack of technical information. Um, he basically is just trying to say that the rich use these opportunities to buy low and sell high, basically, and they're inventing money. You buy this house, buy a house for, I'm gonna make up numbers here, but you buy a house for 150,000, and then you're able to flip it immediately for 200,000. You just invented $50,000. Did I say 200,000? Yeah, $50,000. So that's what he means by the rich invent money. They're just creating money through smart deals, basically. Um, so a few quotes from the rich dad is often the real world is not in the I'm sorry. Often in the real world, it's not the smart that get ahead, but the bold. Um, I think again, he's just saying here that it's the person willing to take a risk and put themselves out there that usually ends up making these profits. But again, I think the problem here is that, like most finance books and financial advice, they're not. This isn't talking to the person who doesn't have any money to invest. I mean, if I had a bunch of money, I'd probably be more bold too to make these investments and stuff, but it's hard when you don't have the money to do it. So I feel like this is kind of like something for the future, for when your assets are finally starting to get to the point where you could do that and you can kind of play that inside game, so another thing is, why would you want to increase your financial intelligence? Because you want to be the kind of person who creates your own luck. So the more financial intelligence you have, the more you could see those opportunities that he talks about, where you can jump in when the price is low and sell high and do flips and stuff like that. So, but you're not going to know how to do that or the timing of that, unless you increase your financial intelligence and do that. So that's all he's talking about there. This is a good one. If the opportunity is too complex and I do not understand it, I don't do it. Simple math and common sense are all you need to do well financially. So, I've heard Dave Ramsey talk about this before too, and it's like, if you don't understand the investment, don't invest. If you don't understand how Bitcoin works, don't buy Bitcoin. If you don't understand how real estate works, don't invest in real estate. You should know your product and know your asset, and that goes back to the previous lesson that he had, where it's like, know your business, know your asset column, know your disciplines within that asset column. So it is not gambling if you know what you're doing. It is gambling if you're throwing money into a deal and praying. It's just kind of common sense. If you don't know what you're doing, that's gambling. If you're just throwing money into like some marketing scheme or something like that, like a pyramid scheme or something like that, and you're just hoping that this is it, this is the one that's going to work, like it's going to work. It's no different than playing the lottery, right? You threw in some money and you're like, oh please, like let's please let me hit the big one. But it's not gambling if you know what you're doing. If you know what you're doing, then it's just strategic planning. So lesson 6: work to learn, don't work for money. So in this chapter, Robert talks about how you should continue to learn skills, even possibly working a second job to gain those skills, so that you can use those skills to grow your ability to make wealth. It's basically like, if it was myself, for example, this would be like me going, I'm going to work a second job that has to do with, stock market, whatever, some stock market discipline. And I'm learning that so that I can combine that with my IT experience, and then use that sort of convergence of information to better make decisions on how to accrue assets, how to, what should I invest in, stuff like that. Like, So you're always trying to grow your abilities and gain new skills. And working a second job is kind of extreme, especially if you're already working a full-time job. But I understand what he's saying here. And maybe you don't need to work a full-time, another second job or something like that, or while you're working a full-time job. Maybe what you need to do is go on YouTube and really educate yourself, or read more books, or there's services like Skillshare that will teach you teach you different skills, and stuff like that. But basically, he's saying that you need to continue to learn and use that to your advantage for growing your assets. So just some quick rich dad quotes out of this chapter is I quote, "I am constantly shocked at how little talented people earn." So I would agree with this. I know some people that are extremely talented, especially in the IT sphere. People that never went to school for it, and they're like the best developers I've ever worked with, the smartest. They do not earn enough, and I don't know if that's a combination of the lack of official like paper degree, or if it's just the way the market works. But it's amazing how little they make based on their talent, because they're extremely talented. Quote, "Job is an acronym for just over broke. Unfortunately, that applies to millions of people," end quote. So this is a little he's kind of making fun here. It's haha, it's a joke. But he's right in the fact that most of us, myself included, are working at a job and it pays the bills. Maybe it doesn't even do that. Maybe it's just barely paying the bills. But you are literally like just over broke. You're maybe you can save a couple hundred a month. Actually, that'd be amazing. Maybe you can only save 100. Maybe you can't save anything every month. Maybe it's just a couple dollars here and there. So you're like literally just over broke. So you want to get out of that kind of rat race and build those assets, so you're not always like just over broke, because that's not a good place to be in. Nobody likes to be there. I don't like being there. Quote, "Being technically specialized has its strengths as well as its weaknesses," end quote. So this is an interesting concept, and I think I've even seen a few books about this. But basically, being a specialist is usually not a good thing. You want to be a generalist. You want to know a lot about, you want to know a little bit or a good amount about a lot of different topics and a lot of different things, instead of a lot about one thing, because it just makes you more diverse. And like, I mean, let's say that, in the case of the financial world, one topic. Like, let's say you are a doctor and you are an amazing doctor. You're like a top surgeon or something of some kind, but you don't know anything about finances. Are you really going to be able to run your own practice? I mean, running a practice, there's employees, there's loans, there's taxes, there's medical billing. I mean, it gets crazy, right? So being highly specialized in one area, although is good in some respects, can also be a weakness in other respects, especially when it comes to building out this business or this asset in the long term. So that's kind of what he's saying there. Chapter 7, overcoming obstacles. Here, Robert discusses the 5 reasons that financially literate people may not develop like an abundant cash flow, and we'll just kind of go over them real quick. And kind of talk about them. So fear, number 1, we already talked about that. People are scared of making decisions, and scared of change, scared of starting a new thing. They're scared to fail, and I mean that's totally reasonable, I think. But you should be aware that fear might be the driver for why you make certain decisions. Number 2 is cynicism. I can see myself being a victim of this one quite a bit, where it's like, well, why me? Or why do you think why would anybody think I could do good at that? Or why should I have this this financial stability or what, stuff like that. Like it's kind of that self-doubt, you're your own critic kind of thing. So stop doing that. I'll try to stop doing that. You stop trying to do that, or you stop doing that. Number 3, laziness. It's pretty straightforward. You just don't want to do it. Like, you're financially literate, but you just don't have the gumption, the drive to put in those extra hours, or study that particular topic. It happens. It's real easy to be lazy. It's fun, feels good, but don't do it. Number 4, bad habits. So maybe you just have a bunch of bad habits. Maybe you tend to spend on luxuries first as opposed to your assets, or you are really bad at keeping track of your expenditures, or you have a bad habit of not putting the money into savings and just letting it sit there and go, I'll wait to see what's at the end of the month, kind of thing, instead of like a dedicated, time of savings. Number 5 is arrogance. You're like, it'll happen eventually. I don't, whatever. I'm cool. Whatever. Don't do that. Just some quick rich dad quotes from the book for this particular chapter. For most people, the reason they don't win financially is because the pain of losing money is far greater than the joy of being rich. I totally get what he's saying here, but for most of us, we don't know what the joy of being rich feels like. So all we know is the pain of losing money. And then we go to fear again because we're afraid of feeling that again, feeling that pain of losing money. So this is a hard one to get over because you've never tasted or experienced that joy of being rich. So, I see what he's saying, but it's hard to grasp after something that you've never actually experienced. We all get a little chicken when fear and doubt cloud our thoughts. That's pretty straightforward. Once you're scared and once you have a little bit of doubt, you're doubting yourself, you're a cynic, it's that cynicism again. You'll get scared and you're like, I don't want to go through with this. I don't want to do this deal, and that could backfire on you. So again, this just has to do with, letting, don't let your emotions guide your financial decisions. Getting out of the rat race is technically easy. It doesn't take much education, but those doubts are cripplers for most people. I think he's right on this, probably. Technically speaking, the basics of financial, stability are pretty easy. Save money, put it away, don't spend it. But there's so many fears and so many doubts that come into your mind. I'm not smart enough to learn how to do real estate. I'm not smart enough to figure out how, the stock market works, or I don't care how it works. It's too difficult. So those can really cripple you. If I pay myself first, I get financially stronger, both mentally and financially. So he has this principle of paying yourself first. I disagree with him a little bit on how strict he is with this, because he'll actually pay himself before he pays his mortgage, before he pays a bill. And he'll be like, the bill will always be there, but I need to pay myself first. That's super dangerous. But I think the overall idea of making sure you pay yourself is good. You let's say you get your paycheck, and from now on you're like, okay, I'm going to take 10% of it, pay myself, and then I'm going to use that 10% to do investing. So that would be just paying yourself first. So it's an interesting concept he has. It's a little dangerous, though, when he talks about not paying bills to pay himself and buy assets instead. That just seems super dangerous to me for some reason. It sounded like, you're going to end up out on the street if you do that, to lose your house or something. I can't afford it causes sadness, a helplessness that leads to despondency and often depression. How can I afford it opens up possibilities, excitement, and dreams. So this is just a mind shift that he talks about. The idea of like, oh, I can't afford that. I'm never going to be able to afford that. I'll never get to do that. It just makes you sad and makes you feel helpless, and just like after a while you're despondent. You're like, I don't care, whatever. I'm never going to get there, so why bother trying? But if you can shift your mental outlook to, I want that how can I afford to get there? Then that opens up possibilities, because then you're going to start thinking of like game plans on how to do it, and you'll get excited about it, and you'll be like, oh, and then after that happens, I'll do this then. And so, like, it's just a change of mindset that can really drive you. So he really encourages this, like, mind trick, basically, a little shift in focus, because it's basically the same question of, like, this object, both want it, but one's saying I can't afford it and gives up, and the other one's like, how can I afford it, and then comes up with a plan. So, um lesson 8, getting started. So here Robert just gives some broad starting plans now that you've gone through the book and stuff, and you kind of understand it. So it's it's I'm just gonna bullet point these really quickly. One, find a reason greater than reality, the power of spirit. So he's basically saying that you can't this isn't going to work if you just want money. You have to have something greater than yourself to aspire to. Maybe it's like, I want to make money to provide for my family, or I want to make money so that I can give back to the community, or I want to make money so that I can leave a lasting legacy. Something bigger than yourself to help drive the pursuit, basically. Make daily choices, the power of choice. So every day, just you want to be in the right mindset to make the correct choice that is going to um, fuel that dream, or fuel the push to that financial stability and financial independence that we're looking for here. 3, choose friends carefully, the power of association. So I had a teacher that used to tell us when we were in high school, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Um, in high school, everybody kind of laughed at that. It's, oh, my friends don't have that much of an effect on me. That's ridiculous. I'm my own person. Well, no, your friends and those around you, your immediate circle, have a huge impact on you. And if you're around other people that are wise with their money, and they're passionate about becoming financially independent, and wanting to help other people, or being generous givers, then that's going to start rubbing off on you, and you'll start to collaborate with each other. So it's just this power of association thing where you will drive each other to be better. 4, master a formula, then learn another one, the power of learning quickly. So once you figured out one formula of asset accruing, and building that business of yours, the minding your own business, then learn another one. So let's say you go from real estate, like, and then the next thing is like, I want to learn about Bitcoin, or maybe the other way around, or something like that. Whatever you want to do. Once you've mastered one, and it's kind of and now it's like self-perpetuating, it's kind of driving itself, learn another one, and then add that on to your growing business and your growing asset column. 5, pay yourself first, the power of self-discipline. This just goes back to what he was saying before about paying yourself first. Like I said, I think he's a little dangerous with how he puts it, but the principle is still the same, that you should pay yourself and use that money to invest in your future, invest in the asset column, and grow your wealth that way. Pay your brokers well. That's number 6, the power of good advice. Once you're in that asset column, you're going to have to start talking to stockbrokers and stuff like that, and you want good advice. So you better make sure that you find ones that are probably going to cost a little bit more, but are worth it. So that's basically all that is. 7, use assets to buy luxuries, the power of focus. So this is what we were saying before. He was saying that the rich wait to buy luxuries. And the reason they wait is because they're waiting for the assets to get up to a point where the asset is generating so much income that they can then buy those luxuries. 8, choose heroes, the power of myth. If you have like a financial hero or business, like somebody you really look up to in the business world or something, I don't know, Musk or Bezos, or a financial advisor like Dave Ramsey, or I don't know. There's so many of them. Something like that. Um, uh, Figure out how they did it and emulate them. Choose a hero and just kind of follow. What drove them. How did they do it? Number 9, teach and you shall receive. The power of giving. So I've heard this before. If you can teach something to somebody, then you really know the material. And I kind of think this is what he's getting at here: is not only are you giving a service to people by teaching them about things, especially in this financial, talk here, um, but as you are able to better explain the material, that means that your knowledge of it is also better now. So you're kind of reinforcing the knowledge yourself and becoming better with it and faster with it, and you know you're becoming better with that. So some quick rich dad quotes from this chapter in this lesson is without a strong reason or purpose, anything in life is hard. Life is extremely hard. Some people have it really good, but even they have their difficult moments. So without a strong purpose or reason to help push you through that, it could become that much harder. And in the same respect, with a strong reason or purpose, you can be successful with these financial things or with your passion project or with your dreams. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say what they used to tell us when we were kids, that you can be anything. You can be anything. No, not everybody has the genetic makeup to be an astronaut. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. But for the most part, most people's dreams aren't as interstellar as an astronaut. And if you have the drive and a purpose and a strong reason for it, like passionate about providing for your family, or passionate about charity or something like that, then it can help drive you through those difficulties of life and this like sort of financial journey to be able to provide those things. Um, the easy road often comes hard, and the hard road often comes easy. Um, so I would definitely agree with this, and it's pretty self-explanatory. But the hard road is usually what most people get. It's very easy. Life is hard, um, but the easy road is usually bought by hard work and upfront payment of that, I think is what he's saying here. I don't know if that's 100% true, but it's nice to think that if you work hard enough, that the road can become easier. Um, Lesson 9, still want more? Um, Here, Robert just gives some advice on what to do next after you've already like consumed this entire book. So 1, stop what you're doing. Um, Basically, he just wants you to stop what you're doing financially and kind of reassess what you should be doing, how you're saving, how you're investing, your asset columns, your expenditures, stuff like that. 2, look for new ideas. What are some new ideas to help increase the income or build assets or whatever. 3, find someone who has done what you want to do. Do you know somebody who's really good at real estate and you want to do that? Then you should talk to them. 4, take classes, read, and attend seminars. This is just knowledge building, trying to figure out, how different things work, so that you can capitalize on those and either use them to create your own business that will then generate income and generate assets, or maybe it's just classes on real estate or stocks or just, financial stability, financial independence, whatever it is. 5, make lots of offers. So he's basically, once you start playing the real estate game or the investment game, he's basically saying you should just make offer after offer on different things to see what hits, what happens. You might miss out if you just make one and get a no, then you're gonna you might be disappointed. But if you made 50 offers and then you get 5 back, you're like, hey, I have options now. 6, jog, walk, or drive a certain area once a month for 10 minutes. So basically, he he says this so that you can kind of get a feel for what's happening in different areas. Like, let's say, like for in my neighborhood right now, for example, there's a ton of houses for sale, but they weren't like that 6 months ago. So I can tell that it's a hot market because they're going up really quickly and that they're being sold almost immediately. And I know that because I go jogging or I go for a run during lunch, like a couple times a week, and I can see what's happening. I can see people moving in, moving out, putting up for sale signs going down, and then I'll go back home and I'll look up the address, and I'm like, oh, it looks like it's sold. So I can kind of tell what's happening in the local market based on that. So that's basically what he's saying there. 7, shop for bargains in all markets. So basically he's saying that since you're trying to accrue all these assets that will hopefully generate income, that you should just shop all kinds of different asset markets, trying to look for bargains. What real estate, cryptocurrency, stocks. Just look for those really good deals and then jump on them. If assuming you have the money, of course, that always assume that you have the money. 8, look in the right places for these things. 9, look for people who want to buy first and then look for somebody who wants to sell. So he has a story in the book about how he first found somebody who wanted to buy a house and he knew what their budget was, and then he found somebody who wanted to sell for significantly less than what he knew the person wanted to buy for, but that the house needed almost no work. The person selling just wanted to get out because they had to move really quick or something. So he bought the house and then sold it to the person he knew would needed to buy it, and then he ended up making the difference in the money. So let's say it was like $100,000 or something like that. So he just made quick money. He never actually like had to move into the house or rent it out. It was just a quick flip from somebody he knew needed to sell, and he facilitated to somebody he knew needed to buy. So that's what he's talking about there. 10, think big. You might want to go in with some people to buy, like, I mean, this is kind of an extreme example, but like you might want to go in with some people to buy an apartment complex because that would generate more income and have better equity returns over the long term. But you're not going to be able to do that yourself. But so you end up thinking big and being like, well, I need like 2 other investors or something like that. So basically, just don't. He's saying don't keep it to just you. You want to think bigger than that and think like collaborations and stuff like that. 11, learn from history. This kind of goes in line with his, find a mentor thing. See what happened in history and what works, how the markets worked, what are historically, good assets, stuff like that. 12, action always beats inaction. You're never going to be able to make that sale or make that flip if you don't act on it, is basically all that is. But like most things here, of course you have to have that money to start with. But it's still a good idea, and it's a pretty straightforward piece of advice. So, and that's pretty much the book in total. I mean, he has like a quick finale epilogue thing at the end, but it's really more of a push to buy one of his other books that explains the cash flow income versus assets argument better. But so I would, like I said, I'd recommend picking up this book, do the 20th anniversary edition. Because, like I said, there is the really easy chapter breakdowns if you just don't have the time to read his narrative, which gets a little wordy, I'll say, and you're just kind of like, let's just get to the point. If you are all about the point and you just want to get to that, then definitely buy this 20th anniversary edition, and just skip right to the study like chapter breakdowns and read those. But I read this book and I wanted to talk about it because I think that financial independence is an important thing for the Human Betterment Project, because there are things that we are all passionate about that we would like to help with or be more secure with, like whether it's our family or you don't want to struggle with medical bills anymore, or you don't want to struggle with always worrying about getting a raise, or there's a charity you're passionate about that you'd love to, start donating to, but you never have it, money, the money to do so. Or maybe you want to start a charity, and where would you even start, but you want to grow the assets to do that. Um, that kind of financial freedom and independence, it could potentially make us better people, because we would then have the ability to help others and help ourselves become better, because we wouldn't have to worry about that job anymore. Like, it's good, it'd be good for like just income and driving income and stuff, but when it's your only source of income, like he says in this book, there is a level of fear that comes with it. And when you have bills coming in, and life is hitting you hard and stuff, and that's your only thing that is like kind of keeping you up, I don't think that's a good place to be at. And you'll never be able to help the people you want to help unless you can build that financial freedom and wealth. It's not really about uh, building the wealth to go out and buy a Bugatti Veyron or something ridiculous like that, or some huge mansion house. Maybe it should be more about building that financial independence so that we can spend time with the people we want to spend time with, and invest in ourselves the way we want to invest. And I don't mean financially, I mean emotionally and educationally or physically. I think that if we can get that financial independence part down, um, then we can kind of focus on those other things even more so than you do now. And I don't want to make this channel, it's not going to turn into like a financial channel. I know I've brought up a couple different financial things lately, but it's only because I'm looking into this stuff so that I can build financial independence, so that I can invest in those other pillars of human betterment: the physical, the mental, the emotional, all of it. And financial independence will give us that sort of freedom that we crave to do those kind of things, and then eventually help people that we want to help, donate time to charities, money to charities, um, causes that we're passionate about, people that we're passionate about. And I think that's important. And that's why this is included in part of the Human Betterment Project here. And that's why it comes up quite a bit. And like I said, we had an unreal heat wave here in the Pacific Northwest. I really don't know how I would have stayed in my own house. When we got back, it was like a sauna. No joke, I think it might have been like 125 in our house when we got home. And that was after the temperature started cooling. So, but, yeah, I don't want to turn this into a financial channel, but I do think it's important that we strive for that financial freedom and financial stability, so that we can, be better in other places, and kind of free up that time that we're constantly using in the rat race. So yeah, I've got more in store for us this week, and I hope you guys keep listening and watching. And yeah, I hope that everybody found this interesting. And hey, now you don't need to read the book, because I basically just broke down the whole thing. But yeah, there's a lot more coming soon. I'm hoping to come out with more videos more often. And please like and subscribe. I really want to make this channel more frequent, more engaging, and have more content, basically. Be able to go places, talk to different people, do interviews, cover more subjects, do reviews on certain things. like this book or devices or programs that will help us improve things like our sleep, like our physical, ability, all kinds of stuff like that. But I need your guys' help to do that. So please like and subscribe and keep watching. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.